Eric Wright, known to the world as Eazy-E, had a story that began in the streets of Compton, California. Born in 1964, he grew up in an environment where violence, poverty, and hustling were not just part of life, they were survival skills. Before the world knew him as the Godfather of Gangsta Rap, Eric was a young man making money through street dealing, using his sharp wit, fearless attitude, and natural leadership to get ahead. He was ambitious, but at that time, music wasn't yet his main path. That would come later, after a combination of talent, timing, and opportunity pushed him into the studio. By the late 1980s, Eric's life was about to change forever. With a distinctive high-pitched voice, street credibility, and a growing network in the Los Angeles music scene, he co-founded Ruthless Records in 1986 alongside Jerry Heller. This independent label would become one of the most powerful forces in rap music, launching the careers of legendary groups like N.W.A and artists who would go on to shape the genre. Eazy-E quickly became the face of West Coast rap, fearless in his lyrics, unapologetic in his attitude, and unafraid to speak about the harsh realities of street life. It was around this time, in January 1989, that Tracy Jenigan met him. For her, the meeting wasn't about fame or status. Eric was already making a name for himself, but he wasn't yet the global icon he would become. What she noticed first wasn't the celebrity image, she saw the person underneath. He had a direct, almost challenging way of looking at people, as if testing whether they could handle the truth. But there was also a vulnerability there, a softness he didn't let everyone see. Tracy wasn't impressed by the money or the growing legend, she saw a man who, for all his confidence, still needed someone to trust. They began a relationship that lasted 6 years, building a life together that was equal parts love and survival. In the music industry, and especially in the world of gangster rap in the early 90s, loyalty was rare and betrayal was common. Tracy understood that Eric's trust had to be earned and protected. She made it her mission to be someone who would never turn on him, no matter the pressure. They eventually had a daughter, Evie, and in between tours, recording sessions, and business meetings, they carved out moments of family life. Eric was constantly in motion. There were late nights in the studio, business negotiations that could stretch for hours, and feuds with other artists that sometimes turned bitter and public. Yet, despite his hectic schedule, he always found ways to connect with his daughter. He would call her from the road, making sure she heard his voice even if he was thousands of miles away. Birthdays might be planned last minute, but they were always memorable. He took responsibility seriously, not just financially, but emotionally and legally as well. Tracy often said that he didn't just say he was Evie's father, he showed it in his actions. As Ruthless Records grew, so did the pressures around Eric. The label became a target for rivals, and the competition in the rap industry was fierce. This wasn't just about music, it was about control, influence, and money. In that world, enemies could come from anywhere, other artists, business partners, or even people within one's own circle. Tracy began to notice unfamiliar faces appearing around Eric. They weren't part of his original crew, and their intentions felt off to her. These weren't casual acquaintances, they seemed to be watching, waiting for an opportunity. The mid-1990s were a dangerous time in West Coast rap. Feuds between artists could spill into real life, and the stakes were high. Eric was at the center of it all, respected, feared, and envied. He was expanding his business, signing new artists, and thinking about the future. But beneath that momentum, Tracy sensed something else, a growing tension, an undercurrent that hinted at danger. In February 1995, it all changed. Eric developed a cough, harsh, constant, and unlike anything he'd experienced before. At first, no one thought it was serious. But the cough didn't stop, and it began to drain his energy. For a man known for his strength and endurance, this was unusual. Eric made the decision to check himself into Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. This shocked many of his friends and associates. Eric wasn't the kind of man to go to the hospital unless he absolutely had to. The diagnosis came quickly and hit hard, AIDS-related pneumonia. Just 10 days after making the diagnosis public, Eric was gone. For the public, it was tragic but straightforward, another reminder of how deadly the disease could be. But for Tracy, it didn't make sense. She had been with him in the weeks before, and he had seemed healthy. AIDS was known to take months or years to weaken someone's immune system, but Eric's decline had been sudden and extreme. He didn't have the visible signs that often came with advanced AIDS at the time: no significant weight loss, no long period of illness, no sores. There were other things that didn't add up. Eric was not a known drug user, which was one of the main risk factors for the disease in the 1990s. None of the women he had been with, including Tracy, tested positive. None of his children tested positive either. The more Tracy thought about it, the more the timeline didn't make sense. When she asked questions, the answers she got felt rehearsed, like a story that had been carefully prepared. It was as if there was a script everyone had been told to follow. As his condition worsened, access to Eric became limited. Tracy, who had been by his side for years, found herself shut out. Security guards blocked her from seeing him, and lawyers seemed to control all communication. Even some family members avoided giving her direct answers. His hospital room became like a fortress, not to protect him from the outside world, but to keep certain people out and control who could speak to him. Then came the news that stunned her: Eric had married Tomika Woods, a woman who had been part of his life but not in the way Tracy had been. The ceremony reportedly took place at his hospital bedside, and some said Eric was too weak to even speak at the time. The marriage made Tomika the legal heir to his estate, giving her control over Ruthless Records and other assets. Tracy only learned about the marriage after it happened, and it left her feeling blindsided. When Eric died, the grief was quickly overshadowed by battles over his legacy. Lawsuits began almost immediately. Ruthless Records became the center of legal fights, with partners and associates accusing one another of wrongdoing. Over $600,000 disappeared from company accounts, and important files vanished without explanation. People who had once stood side by side with Eric turned against each other, fighting over money, control, and influence. For Tracy, the pain was not just about losing Eric, it was about losing the chance to understand what had really happened. She remembered him as the man behind the legend, someone who could be both strong and gentle, a father who loved his daughter, and a partner who trusted her in a world where trust was rare. But she also remembered the strange events in those final days: the sudden illness, the secrecy, the decisions made when Eric was too weak to resist, and the silence that followed. Even decades later, Tracy has never stopped wondering if his death was truly what it appeared to be. In her heart, she believes there is a truth hidden somewhere, one that the music industry, with all its power and politics, may never fully reveal. Adam West had already built a name for himself in the 1960s as the star of the wildly popular Batman television series. His portrayal of the Caped Crusader was colorful, campy, and full of the playful charm that made the show a hit with audiences around the world. But behind the scenes, there was a story few people knew, one involving a special project that almost no one outside of the production team had ever seen. In the mid-1960s, West's schedule was already packed. He had been filming Batman for 2 seasons, and the demand for his time was enormous. The character of Batman wasn't just a role, he had become a brand. West was invited to appear at events, record public service announcements, and even star in commercials, many of which tied directly into the popularity of the show. Every appearance was an opportunity for the network and the studio to keep Batman in the public eye. One of the more unusual opportunities that came his way was a series of light-hearted commercials for Nestlé's Quick, the chocolate drink mix. In these ads, West played a humorous character named Captain Quick, a spoof on the suave, secret agent style made famous by James Bond. Wearing a colorful costume and armed with quick one-liners, he brought the same comedic timing that fans loved in Batman. These commercials aired in the United States and were designed to capitalize on the era's fascination with spy movies, which were booming thanks to films like Goldfinger and Thunderball. But then, in 1967, just as the second season of Batman was winding down, West received an offer for something even more unusual. He was asked to put on the Batman costume one more time, but this time, it wouldn't be for the American audience. This was a secretive, small-scale project that would be filmed in London. What made it so mysterious was that it wasn't meant to be aired in the United States at all. In fact, the entire production seemed to exist almost in the shadows, as if it were meant to be hidden away once it was completed. The details were never fully made public at the time. Even the most dedicated Batman collectors, people who had spent decades hunting down rare memorabilia, lost footage, and behind-the-scenes materials, had no idea this project existed. It didn't appear in TV schedules, it wasn't promoted in magazines, and it was never mentioned in interviews. To the fans in America, it simply didn't exist. What West filmed in London was unlike the bright and exaggerated Batman episodes American viewers knew. This short production had a very different feel, part promotional piece, part special appearance, and part experimental footage. Some who later caught glimpses of it described it as a mix between a public service announcement and a short scripted scene. The style, tone, and even the set design looked distinctly British, with darker lighting and a slightly more serious mood than the playful American show. Filming in London meant working with a completely different crew, and West reportedly enjoyed the change of pace. England in the late 1960s was buzzing with cultural energy, the height of the swinging London era. Music, fashion, and art were all going through explosive transformations, and West found himself in the middle of that atmosphere. Between shooting scenes, he explored parts of the city, visited local pubs, and was even spotted chatting with British actors who were curious about what the American Batman was doing in their city. But once the project wrapped, it disappeared almost instantly. No broadcast date was announced. No press photos were sent out. It wasn't included in Batman's syndication packages. It was as if the footage had been locked away in a vault and forgotten. Over time, people who had worked on it moved on to other projects, and memories of that strange London shoot faded. For decades, there were only rumors, whispers among a small circle of fans that somewhere, there was a lost Batman seen unlike anything else from the series. The mystery deepened because Adam West himself rarely spoke about it. In interviews, he sometimes hinted at a little Batman thing he had done overseas, but he never went into detail. Some believe he didn't see it as significant compared to his other work, others think he was simply respecting a request from the producers to keep it quiet. Whatever the reason, the result was the same: the footage remained unseen for over 50 years. During those decades, the Batman series gained legendary status. Reruns introduced the colorful show to new generations, conventions kept the fandom alive, and Adam West became a pop culture icon. Collectors managed to track down almost every piece of Batman-related media, scripts, photos, and even rare commercials, but the London project remained the one thing no one could find. It became something of a holy grail for Batman historians. Then, after half a century, the impossible happened. The lost footage resurfaced. Someone had kept a copy all these years, and it finally made its way into the hands of fans. The quality wasn't perfect, the colors had faded slightly, and the sound carried the grainy texture of old film, but it was unmistakably Adam West in full Batman costume, standing in a London setting that had never appeared in the American series. Seeing it after so many decades was surreal. For longtime fans, it was like opening a time capsule. The tone was unusual, still playful in moments, but with a more grounded, almost noir-like atmosphere. West delivered his lines with that familiar mix of seriousness and tongue-in-cheek humor, but there was also a sense that this was a different kind of Batman performance, one shaped by the unique circumstances of its creation. The rediscovery of this scene also reignited conversations about how much television history might still be hiding in archives, basements, and forgotten film reels. Back in the 1960s, studios often didn't think to preserve every piece of footage. Videotapes were reused, and promotional materials were discarded once they'd served their purpose. That's why so many lost TV treasures have never been recovered. The fact that this Batman project survived at all was almost a miracle. For Adam West's legacy, the scene added another layer. It reminded people that his Batman wasn't just an American phenomenon, it had an international reach. Even though the London footage had been buried for decades, it showed that West had been in demand around the world during Batman's peak popularity. It also reflected how television in the 1960s was experimenting with new formats, crossovers, and international collaborations, even if most of those experiments never saw the light of day. Today, fans can finally see what they were missing for over half a century. While it may only be a few minutes long, the Lost London Batman project is a fascinating window into a forgotten chapter of TV history. It's a reminder of how many stories are still waiting to be uncovered and how even the most familiar characters can still surprise us. And for those who grew up watching Adam West battle colorful villains on their living room screens, it's a chance to see their childhood hero one more time, in a scene they never knew existed until now. In 1967, Adam West was at the peak of his fame as Batman, a role that had made him one of the most recognizable faces on television. The Batman TV series was a pop culture phenomenon, known for its colorful villains, over-the-top fight scenes, and campy humor. Children adored it, adults enjoyed its quirky style, and the actors behind the masks had become household names. But in that same year, Adam West put on his Batman costume for a project that almost no one knew about. It wasn't part of the regular TV series, nor was it a movie for theaters. It was something filmed far away from Hollywood, in a location most fans would never have guessed, and it would remain unseen for more than 50 years. The project began quietly, without the big publicity campaigns that usually surrounded anything related to Batman. There were no magazine announcements, no television commercials, and no interviews teasing what was about to be filmed. Instead, Adam West boarded a plane to London, traveling overseas with only a small team to work on what was described as a secret project. The purpose wasn't entirely clear to those outside the production, but rumors suggested it might have been related to a promotional deal, a special appearance, or even an experimental episode. Whatever it was intended to be short, fun, and memorable, and very much in the style of the Batman that fans knew and loved. London in the late 1960s was a vibrant, stylish city. It was the height of the swinging 60s, a cultural explosion of music, fashion, and art. The Beatles were dominating the charts, the fashion industry was booming with colorful and daring designs, and film studios were busy producing both classic dramas and quirky comedies. For Adam West, stepping into this world while wearing the Batman costume must have felt surreal. Here he was, a Hollywood television star, walking through the streets of England dressed as the Caped Crusader, turning heads wherever he went. Even though the filming was meant to be secret, it was impossible for him to completely blend in. The shoot itself was unusual compared to the regular Batman episodes. The American TV series was filmed on sound stages in Los Angeles, where sets could be controlled and lighting perfected. This London project, however, used real streets, real buildings, and real locations. The Batman suit, which had been designed for the controlled environment of a studio, looked slightly different under the natural light of London's cloudy skies. There were moments when Adam West had to interact with locals who were not actors but curious passers-by. Some of them were astonished to see Batman in person, wondering if a new movie was being made. What made this even more mysterious was that the footage was never released to the public. After the shoot was completed, it disappeared into archives, storage rooms, or perhaps private collections. Even the most dedicated Batman collectors and historians had no idea it existed. For decades, fans believed they had seen every performance Adam West had given in the cape and cowl. They knew about the TV series, the 1966 Batman movie, the countless promotional appearances, and even the commercials he did while in character. But this London film, whatever its original purpose, was completely unknown. Over the years, rumors circulated among small groups of insiders. Some claimed it was part of a promotional campaign for a product in the UK. Others believed it was a television segment that was never aired because of licensing issues. There were even whispers that it had been created for a private event, such as a charity gala or a corporate celebration. The truth, however, remained elusive. Adam West himself didn't speak much about it, perhaps because it had been such a minor and experimental project compared to his main work, or perhaps because it was quickly forgotten once it was filmed. What is certain is that this piece of Batman history lay hidden for more than half a century. In the meantime, the Batman franchise evolved in ways that would have been unimaginable in the 1960s. The campy, light-hearted tone of Adam West's version gave way to darker interpretations in comics and films. Michael Keaton, Christian Bale, Ben Affleck, and Robert Pattinson each took on the role, reshaping Batman for new generations. But despite all these changes, there was always a nostalgic love for the original TV Batman, a love strong enough that fans were eager to discover any lost footage, photographs, or behind-the-scenes moments from that era. When the London footage was finally rediscovered, It was a major event for Batman enthusiasts. For those who had studied the history of the character, this was like uncovering a missing chapter in a beloved book. It offered a glimpse into an alternate moment in Batman history, a time when Adam West was still at the height of his popularity, when the character was portrayed with humor and charm rather than grit and darkness. The discovery also raised questions about how many other forgotten projects might still be out there, waiting to be found. The rediscovered film shows Adam West in full Batman costume, navigating London's streets and engaging in light-hearted interactions that feel perfectly in line with the spirit of the 1966 series. There is a sense of playfulness in his movements, as if he knows the absurdity of seeing Batman in such an unexpected location. The contrast between the Gothic architecture of London and the brightly colored superhero costume creates a strange but delightful visual. For fans who grew up watching Batman in the 1960s, seeing this footage now is like stepping into a time machine. It captures not only the charm of Adam West's performance but also the unique energy of the late 1960s, a period when superhero stories were campy, exaggerated, and unafraid to embrace their own silliness. There is no attempt to make Batman seem like a brooding figure of vengeance. Instead, he is portrayed as a clever, slightly theatrical hero who can disarm criminals with a witty remark as easily as with a punch. It's also a reminder of how much television and film production have changed since that era. Back then, it was possible to film something on location, store it away, and have it vanish for decades without a trace. Today, with the internet and digital media, even the smallest promotional videos are likely to be preserved and shared endlessly. The fact that this London Batman project could disappear for more than 50 years speaks to how easily pop culture history can slip through the cracks. As for why it was never released, the answer is still somewhat unclear. Some speculate that licensing rights between the American producers of Batman and whatever British company was involved might have caused legal problems. Others think that the footage was simply considered unimportant and was shelved without much thought. Whatever the case, its eventual resurfacing gives fans a rare treasure, one more performance from Adam West in the role that defined his career. The story of this lost Batman project is not just about a forgotten piece of television history. It's also about the way certain cultural moments can be frozen in time, only to reappear decades later and spark joy in those who remember them. For younger fans, it's a chance to see a version of Batman they may only know from old clips and reruns. For older fans, it's a nostalgic return to a time when superheroes were colorful, campy, and above all, fun. Even though Adam West passed away in 2017, his legacy as Batman continues to live on. The rediscovery of this London footage is like a small gift to his fans, a reminder of the warmth and humor he brought to the role. It shows that even after so many years, there are still surprises left in the world of Batman, and that sometimes, the most unexpected discoveries are the most delightful. The heart of the dispute after Eric's passing was centered on his will. This was the document he signed during the last fragile moments of his life, leaving everything, his money, his music rights, and his entire legacy, to Toma Woods, the woman he had married on his deathbed. The signature should have been the final say in his affairs, but it wasn't. Whispers began to spread, doubts began to creep in, and the edges of the truth became blurred. People questioned whether Eric had been fully aware of what he was signing. Had he been thinking clearly in those last moments, or was his mind clouded by illness and exhaustion? Some even wondered if he had been coerced by those around him, people who might have been waiting for the perfect moment to take advantage of his weakened state. Others feared that he had been so far gone that his signature was merely a formality, a symbolic act by a man whose life was slipping away. Tracy was not the only one who questioned what really happened in those final days. Even within the tight-knit but cutthroat world of the music industry, there were murmurs of doubt. Former members of N.W.A, people who had been close to Eric, admitted that they, too, had felt uneasy. One of them recalled visiting Eric just days before his death, describing a man who seemed to move in and out of awareness. There were moments when Eric recognized people and seemed fully present, but those moments were mixed with times of confusion. "I saw him days before he died, and he still recognized me," the former member said later. He knew what was happening, but something wasn't right. Those words hung heavy with unspoken truths, leaving the impression that Eric's last days were not only tragic but also clouded with suspicion. The fight over Eric's estate quickly became more than just a legal battle about money. It transformed into a struggle over who would control the story of his life and death, and who would have the final say in shaping his legacy. The moment that deepened Tracy's fear came unexpectedly during a late-night television broadcast. She had not been looking for answers in that moment, but what she heard hit her like a punch to the chest. On the screen, Suge Knight made an offhand, almost casual remark about injecting people with AIDS. The audience laughed uncomfortably, but for Tracy, the words were not a joke, they were chilling. It was as though the air in the room froze. Her mind spun as she thought about what he had said. Could someone truly be that cruel? Could someone intentionally use a deadly illness as a weapon? Eric Wright was not just a celebrity to Tracy. He was her first love, the father of her child, and someone she had stood beside for years. The idea that he could have been the victim of a calculated act of biological sabotage was horrifying. And yet, deep down, she admitted to herself something she had long avoided saying out loud: we suspected him all along. That suspicion had been built over years of watching the people in Eric's life, noticing their glances, their silences, and their sudden changes in behavior. In the music industry, she had seen how quickly power could shift, how enemies could become allies and allies could become threats. She knew that there were people who had much to gain from Eric's downfall. Time passed, but Tracy's determination only grew stronger. The pain of losing Eric did not fade, and neither did the suspicion that his death was not as simple as the official story claimed. Along with her daughter, Eazy, she began a long, exhausting mission to uncover the truth. They decided to create a documentary, The Mysterious Death of Eazy-E, that would serve as both an investigation and a tribute. It was a way to publicly confront the shadows that had lingered for years. The work was grueling. They spoke to doctors who had treated Eric, though many seemed uncomfortable answering direct questions. They pored over medical records, searching for inconsistencies. The official death certificate, which should have provided a clear account, was filled with problems, missing signatures, conflicting dates, and timelines that didn't match. It was as if the facts had been twisted to fit a certain version of events, or erased entirely. Revisiting the pain of Eric's death was not easy. It meant opening wounds that had never fully healed. It meant risking public criticism and disbelief from people who either didn't care or didn't want to believe the truth. But Tracy refused to give up. I owe it to him, she said. I need to keep fighting for him and try to find justice no matter what. Their investigation led them to disturbing theories. There were whispers about a tampered injection, something given to Eric under the guise of medical treatment but intended to harm. Other threads pointed to corporate power struggles, battles over control of ruthless records, and the possibility that someone wanted Eric's voice silenced forever. The deeper they went, the more it seemed that his death might not have been the result of illness alone, but a deliberate act carried out in the shadows where ambition and vengeance meet. When the documentary finally aired, it sent shockwaves across the country. Tracy and Eazy had laid out their research, their evidence, and their personal story with unflinching honesty. The reactions were mixed. Some called it nothing more than a conspiracy theory, dismissing it as an attempt to rewrite history. Others saw it as a brave act of truth-telling, shining light on a story the industry had tried to bury. For Tracy, winning over the public was never the goal. She wanted clarity for herself, for her daughter, and for anyone willing to look past the surface. The backlash came quickly. Tracy received threatening messages and strange phone calls in the middle of the night. People in powerful positions, some of whom had once been close to Eric, cut off all contact. It was clear to her that there were those who wanted this story to stay buried. But whenever fear began to creep in, she would look at her daughter, the living reminder of Eric's life and love, and remember why she could never stop. To Tracy, this fight was never just about one man's death, it was about protecting a legacy and exposing the lies that had been built around it. This is his legacy, she said in one interview, her voice heavy with years of grief. And they've buried it under lies. As she and Eazy continued to dig, the mystery deepened. The autopsy report, the most critical document in understanding how Eric died, was missing. Hospitals that should have kept records either denied having them or claimed they had been lost. Staff members from Eric's final days vanished from public view or refused to speak. Audio recordings from key hospital conversations were erased or mysteriously went missing. Witnesses who had once been willing to talk suddenly changed their minds, their credibility questioned and their words discredited. Then there was the suspicious deathbed marriage to Tamika Woods. How could such a major life decision have taken place when Eric was reportedly too weak to speak? And why had no one been held accountable for the many unanswered questions? Each new piece of evidence pointed to a larger web of secrecy, as though powerful forces were determined to keep the truth hidden. Despite all this, there was no official investigation, no arrests, no accountability, only silence. That silence was perhaps the most unsettling part of all, as if the truth was considered too dangerous to speak aloud. Now at 55, Tracy has lived through decades of grief and struggle. Those years have only sharpened her resolve. She no longer hides her feelings behind cautious words. "He was my first love, my friend, my daughter's father, and I watched him be taken from us," she says. Her voice is steady but carries the weight of everything she's endured. She doesn't claim to have every answer. She doesn't pretend to know more than she has discovered. But she is certain of one thing: something was done to Eric. Something cruel, calculated, and deliberate. And she refuses to let it be forgotten. "We suspected him all along, and now the world needs to pay attention," she says, her words a challenge as much as a warning. This is more than the story of a man's death. It is about love, betrayal, power, and the courage to face dangerous truths. It is about a woman who refused to be silenced, who fought for decades to pull back the curtain on what really happened in those final days. Tracy's voice, once ignored, has become the most important one in telling this story. Whether or not the world chooses to believe her, she has made sure her truth is heard. And in that way, Eric's story and her fight for justice will never be erased. In the end, Tracy's journey is not just about uncovering how Eric Wright died, but about preserving who he was and ensuring his story is not rewritten by those who would rather it be forgotten. It is about love that refused to fade, a truth too heavy to ignore, and a legacy that will outlive the lies told to bury it. No matter how many doors are closed, how many voices try to silence her, or how many years pass, she stands unshaken in her purpose. For Tracy, justice is not just a goal, it is a promise, and she intends to keep it for as long as she lives.